The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hidden Horsepower is back. Hey everybody, Joe Costello here, and another episode, Total Seal Piston Rings, bringing you hopefully what has become one of your favorite podcasts in your podcast feed, Apple Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud. A lot of people writing reviews, a lot of people finding the podcast on the brand new TotalSeal.com website, totally redesigned, and the podcast is very prominently featured. Joining me as co-host on this episode, he's back, Mr. Lake Speed Jr. Lake, how are you?
Doing great, Joe, doing great.
The last time we were together, Joey Arrington was our victim. We had a great time with that one. Got a lot of positive feedback in the feed. A lot of people listening to Joey talk about blowing engines in half with nitrous oxide.
Oh, yeah, the picture said it all, but then, of course, this is no pictures in this, but I think he did a great job of explaining, what that car was like when he literally blew the engine in half. Was pretty great. Like you said on the intro, we are getting just phone call after phone call, email, comments. There's a lot of momentum building around the podcast. People just like the people sharing their background stories, telling some fun stories along the way, a little bit of, kind of high-tech bench racing, but it's still bench racing and sharing the stories. We even have a brand new Facebook page for the podcast too. So if people want to follow along and catch up the latest episodes and have some discussion, there's a place they can do that too now.
You guys are putting the pressure on me because I open up the NHRA National Dragster. I see a full page ad for the podcast. And obviously I come to this with everything I've got because I know that everybody on this thing is smarter than I am, knows more than I am, but this is my opportunity to try to maybe pull something out for our listeners who are probably all smarter than I am as well. And we're going to do exactly that again, but you've had a great idea this week. We're kind of going into a different direction. Dean Baker, who is the head engine builder at Joe Gibbs Racing Motocross, that racing team. So we're kind of going into a little two-wheel racing action, but the competition is severe over there. I like where you're going with this week.
Well, it's great to have Dean on. One, people that have listened to the episodes that I've been on know my background is, karting. That's where my dad grew up, karting, and that's where I started way before all the NASCAR stuff was go-karting. So two-cycle stuff. I don't know a whole lot of other guys that have gone from two-cycle engines to four-cycle engines and have done both at pretty much the highest level. So that's why I wanted to have my buddy Dean on to talk a little bit about that.
Well, let's bring him on. He is the head engine builder, as I said, Joe Gibbs Racing Motocross. Of course, the coach is involved in everything, and he wins in everything. Mr. Dean Baker. Dean, welcome to Hidden Horsepower. How are you?
Hi, Joe. Thank you for having me on.
No, we're thrilled. At some point, I will ask you to tell us something embarrassing about Lake. Feel free to interject at any point. That's become.
He's got plenty of ammunition.
I'm sure that's become a staple on the show. Everybody loves it. It's not even so much that I want to hear it as the audience. They want to hear it. So for their sake, Dean, at some point. But first of all, the coach, talk about Joe Gibbs Racing Motocross and the fact you started out at Factory Kawasaki and get the opportunity to work for a team, for a person that is known for success in so many different arenas, whether it be the NFL, NASCAR, drag racing, and now motocross, supercross.
Sure, Coach, he's done, like you said, a lot of things at the highest level and been successful at it. So when you're in his arena and he speaks, everyone's at attention. And so he commands a lot of respect, and it's pretty amazing just to be in his presence, to hear the way he talks. He's positive. He encourages people. I think he's able to get the best out of his people just being who he is. And you could almost like taste whatever he's wanting to get from you. You're all in.
That's leadership.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of this. You want to stay that extra hour at the end of the day or get in a little earlier to finish a project. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got to this point before we move forward and talk about some specific racers and projects and ultimately how these engines make as much power as they do in the competitive arena that you're in. At some point, it all comes back to horsepower, right? But, Dean, how did you get here? Tell us about your beginnings and coming up through the ranks before you got to Joe Gibbs.
Sure. As a kid, I got a mini bike, and so my dad kind of fostered that love for motorcycles. He had it, got me into it. We raced up through the ranks. Along the way, I was able to actually win an amateur national championship myself, and thought I was going to continue on right into the pro ranks. I did make that transition, didn't really have the talent to go too far. Made some pro nationals, and got to the point where that wasn't too much trouble to qualify and make the motos. Decided that was about as far as I was going to get, and went to college. Was thinking I needed to do something solid for my future, and about a year and a half through my college years, a buddy that's still racing, raced for Peak Honda back in '91, and he's like, "Hey, you want to be my mechanic?" I said, "Shoot, that sounds better than going to school," which I always loved working on my bikes. And I kind of have a joke for myself is that I always worked on them more than riding, and I might have been a little bit better if I'd have just rode it into the ground, but I always enjoyed working on it. So I said yes to that, dropped out of school, and started on that path as far as my career goes. And just being in the right place and working hard, meeting the right people. I got put in the right place for the job and went to Honda of Troy. They were an early private team that kind of was following the footsteps of the pro circuit team. Successful privately owned team. Did a lot of it on their own, very little factory backing. And I was there for 11 years, and then on to Factory Cowie when the opportunity arrived, Factory KTM, and then now here at JGRMX.
Wow. What a career already, and I'm looking at your photo on the website, and you look like a pretty young guy. That is a career of a lifetime already to get to this point. And we know, Coach says, in professional sports, you win with people. You're one of those people. That's got to be a pretty big honor.
Yeah, sure. To get the opportunity to come here. I'm from the East Coast, and I had thoughts like, how do I move back towards the East Coast to, be where my relatives are, the rest of my family and so forth. And it just kind of all fell into place. And for sure, Coach Gibbs, when he gave me the opportunity, his son Coy founded the motocross team. So meeting with those two guys was, I don't know if it was a dream because I never dreamt it, but it was amazing to, live those days where you're just considering that opportunity. It's pretty amazing.
It absolutely is, and that's so many people in this motorsports thing, exactly that story, right? They just get on this journey, and one day they're in someplace amazing, and they look back and how did we get here? Lake, dive in. Let's talk about some of the people that Dean has worked with, built engines for over the years. I know you as growing up around NASCAR, drivers and riders, they got that personality, and ultimately they're the one opening and closing the throttle. Dive in here.
Well, it was interesting, like you said, about Dean getting the call from Coach Gibbs and Coy. I was at Gibbs when they made that decision to start the motocross team, and of course, us being a bunch of four-wheel guys, we're like, they're doing what? But my office was down in the Nationwide shop, which is where they set up the motocross shop as well, same building. And I remember hearing, Jeremy and Dean and all those guys, start showing up and everything. We're like, oh, okay. Well, they came from factory Kawasaki, the pro circuit deal. So that was, we knew those guys because that was, Bubba Stewart and McGrath and Ricky Carmichael. And I'm not sure exactly who all you got to work with, Dean. I just remember showing up, and in the early days it was like Justin Barsha and Davey Millsaps, and it was the Yamaha deal, and then James Stewart did come, and I remember when, you guys winning races and doing all that. So I just remember you guys coming in, and the learning curve had to be incredibly steep, just because you were building an operation from scratch. It wasn't like you walked into, from you and I talking before when we were working together, that you go to work for, say, factory Kawasaki, all those facilities and all those things were in place. When you come to Gibbs
Correct.
And you're the Yamaha team, everything's new.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. It was, it was in some ways a good opportunity to take some of the best pieces that you've experienced and try to put those into place. At the same time, it's kind of be careful what you ask for, because now you have a full plate. That's kind of a little bit how I felt. It's like, this is amazing opportunity. Starting from scratch, we were able to put into place some of the best tools for me to continue learning, whether it's dynos, flow benches, other machining type equipment, just pretty much the best, because you're building it brand new. And it's, like I said, it's a big chunk to bite off, but also a great opportunity. And that's the way it's been from day one.
So what was it like coming into the Gibbs machine shops? I'm thinking about, I know I've seen you over there wearing the machines and things. What was that like? I mean, I guess I've never seen what the factory Kawasaki place was like or anything. Compare where you were to when you first started working over at the Gibbs engine shop. What was that like?
Yeah, it was. That reminds me of when I first sat down with Coy, and where I believe we were having breakfast with he and Coach, and he's giving me all the positive things, and he's like, "Yeah, you can scribble some drawing down on a napkin, and we can make it." And I thought, yeah, that's kind of the pitch I would give too. But yeah, scratch it on a napkin. But he was pretty much serious, which I found out after I took the tour of the shop and so forth. But yeah, it's instead of one or two manual lathes in a mill or something like that at my previous jobs, there was rows and rows of CNC machines and operators, scurrying about like ants on the floor. And pretty much, if you could dream it, they can draw it for real and have you a part.
Like John Riddle, right? He just told John Riddle, this is what I'm wanting, and he'll bring you a drawing. Says, you mean like look like this? Close,
exactly.
Man, change this, that. The next thing you know is like they'll bring you over a 3D printed part. Oh, here you go. See if that fits.
Yep. We've it's been a pretty good list of things that are new tools at your fingertips that I hadn't experienced before. If it's 3D printing, we come up with a solid model that we now have the capabilities in our motocross shop with Spencer. He'll draw it up, kind of get all my input, send it over to the cup shop. They'll print it out. We'll get this plastic part that we can actually test fit, and then we find out, no, that's not it. Send it back, make adjustments, whatever. But yeah, a lot of things like that we've actually had to learn to try to utilize.
Yeah, learning curve is pretty. Yeah, it just, those technologies, like you said, enable you to gain just exponential leaps, because the time spent trying to create that part to begin with, like I said, on a manual lathe or something like that, takes so long, and then the repeatability that when you have that 3D model and Spencer can draw it out and
Mm-hmm.
you print it, now that's a part you can make over and over again, and the tolerances are going to be really, really small because of how you develop that part.
Yeah, I could laugh at myself because I have some skills that I've attained and honed over the years, but it's, on a manual mill or lathe or whatever, it's it's tedious work just to get it right, but then to duplicate it was the first one's fun. The next however many is not so much.
Exactly.
So, Dean, let me ask you, before we get into the hidden horsepower aspect of it, Lake teased us with some of the guys that you may have built engines for in the past. Throw some names out there so the audience can put your engine building prowess with some records that they know.
Sure. We earned a few championships when I was at Yamaha of Troy, and that was the transition from Honda of Troy to Yamaha's. And we won four 125 Supercross titles with Ernesto Fonseca, two of those, Stefan Roncada, and then what most people might be certainly familiar with now is Chad Reed. So that was his first year in the U.S., his first championship. I was able to work with him. From there, James Stewart, Michael Byrne at Kawasaki, Paul Carpenter, he was our 250 guy. That was what led me to Kawasaki, was to be the 250 engine builder there, and then move on to the 450 engine size. James Stewart here at JGR, Justin Brayton, David Millsaps, our current bunch of guys, Savachi, Freddie Norin. We've had 250 guys, Alex Martin, Jimmy D, Jimmy Dakotas, Justin Hill, Weston Pike. So a lot of guys that have, I guess, solidified themselves in, I guess, somewhat of history, that people always remember them. Some of them would have liked to achieve more, but it's been a good road.
Well, certainly Davey, Bubba, Chad, these guys, Ernesto, these guys are names that transcend two-wheel racing. If you watch any kind of motorsport show, you're going to hear their names on a regular basis, certainly. So at that point, the racer needs horsepower. They want to win, they need horsepower. What's it like dealing with motocross, supercross racers and their demand for power maybe compared to what Lake is used to dealing with, the guys that are on four wheels? Is it the same?
I would have to say that there's some similarities. Our types of racing are so different, being that we deal with supercross and motocross. So those two disciplines are different enough in itself, even though you could look at the motorcycle and go, it's pretty much the same motorcycle. And then for Supercross to have to exit a corner and then navigate a triple jump that's 70 feet, or a set of whoops or some obstacle like that, compared to exit turn 2 and pin it down into turn 3. I'm not really sure what that takes, but it's it's pretty much a drag race, I suppose. What do you think, Blake?
Well, I've not been to any of the outdoor events, but I have been to some of the indoor events, and that was the first thing that struck me when I went to the first indoor Supercross race, was that there's no way those guys could be on throttle for very long, other than the very start of the race to get to the first turn. It's like, okay, I see there is a drag race at the very beginning, but from that point on, like you said, it's all about using that power to help control the bike so that you have the inertia you need to make that jump, to maintain going across the whoops. It's about control, not about brute force. And I was like, oh, this is really different. And then the other thing that I think is really unique to the type of engines you're building that is very different than most engines on the planet is that the clutch is also inside your engine. And in most of these engines, it shares the same motor oil, which is obviously how you and I start working together, because when you came to Gibbs, I was the oil guy. And, of course, Corey's like, hey, we make great oil for race cars, and you need to make great oil for us. And, well, okay, we'll figure that out. And that was a huge learning curve of the things we did to make horsepower in a cup engine that didn't have a clutch. Those things didn't work too well in the clutch. Yeah. Especially with the riders seem to be so different in how they use the clutch. I think talk a little bit about that, because I think that was the biggest thing I didn't know. I just didn't understand that, okay, there's a clutch and race clutch and go-karts, but that rider influence on the clutch is huge.
Yeah, the riders, they range from kind of using the clutch to what I always joke with them, that leaving pit road and getting back to the pits. And then others are complete abusers. And so that's the abusers are the ones that are pose the biggest trouble for us. Is we have to try to make everything live in this environment that they're really creating a negative situation for the oil to work in the clutch and then lubricate everything versus the motocross races, they're 35 minutes around there. So we got guys that can totally destroy the oil in that short a period of time. So it's rider dependent. We have two different size motorcycles that we race, the 250 and the 450. And without having the experience, you'd kind of assume, well, the smaller engine, they just they totally abuse that one. But it's not always the case. It's really the situation is dependent on who's riding it.
My experience, or you've told me and seen in the past, is a lot of times the 450, because there is more power, there's like more opportunity to abuse the clutch, just if they're using it as traction control, essentially.
Yeah, they're basically limiting the power, where some of the riders they'll basically turn the engine on, meaning throttle is to the stop, wide open, and they're using the clutch to determine how much acceleration they want. And then maybe on the flip side, you'll have a guy that barely touches the clutch, and he's modulating the power with just the throttle position. And so we've had both types of guys, and everybody in between. So it's trying to. There's multiple parts in there too to try to make things work, where it's different clutch plates, which have different amounts of surface that would give you grip. There's also different materials that give you different amount of grip. Then we have different spring rates and for the clamping force on the clutch pack, different ratios for the clutch lever and the clutch arm that are down in the case. So it's different rates of lift and so forth to try to come up with the best combination for this, said rider that abuses it. So we try to figure out what we can do to make it live a little bit longer. Of course, their help would be appreciated. But
right.
if that's the way they ride, then we have to figure out how to provide the longevity of those parts and let the rider do what they do best, which is ride it however they ride it.
And I'm sure you've probably seen guys who can win races that do it both ways. So there's not only one path of power management to winning a race.
Yeah, we try to influence that a little bit, but then eventually you realize that this guy got here up team because he goes really fast. He's been doing it this way, and we try to needle a little bit, but you kind of realize that that's the way they do it, and let's try to accommodate that.
I remember you saying at one point when we were talking about some of the different oils for the clutches and how the clutches perform, the key was keeping the same consistency in the clutch, because some of those guys, if they start to feel the clutch go away, now they start thinking about the clutch, and you don't want them thinking. You want them just driving, or they just got to ride the bike. Mm-hmm. Don't think about the clutch. Mm-hmm. And the moment the clutch starts to fade, now they're thinking about it. Now they're just not having that muscle memory just taking over and doing it. So have you found over time that between, say, rider A and rider B, that you need to tune the engine differently as one of the tools to managing the horsepower? Because it kind of sounds like what we've always looked at is you want to make as much power as you can, because that way you have it when you need it. But really, this is more of a sport that's about power management than it is just making peak power.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of factors involved there. There's besides the rider, it's the ground, the terrain that you're riding on. What's the Supercross? They bring in all different types of dirt. It can change from year to year for each of the venues, and then the outdoors we tend to see the same dirt year after year because it's natural terrain and the track's always there.
Yeah.
Yep. But and actually the nationals, they start to bring in like some sand so that maybe in bad weather that the ground's able to absorb a little bit more of the water or the rain. And so it changes a little bit. But we usually try to get as much power as we can and then try to tailor it to the rider's likings. Earlier where I mentioned that we have the two different size engines, 250 and 450. So max power is really important on the 250. One horse can make the difference where, your rider and bike actually looks tons better than the competition, where the 450, we can make the bike too aggressive for the rider. So in that class, we kind of tend to do more tailoring or massaging of the power or focus on the delivery. There's lots of things that we can do to kind of tame it down, but still maintain the high output. And the 250, it's all that we can get almost all the time. And then maybe we work at the individual tracks to try to make traction or maintain traction a little bit easier for the rider. Because, the tracks can get slick, and then it's difficult to put the power down to the ground. But the 450s, we do a lot there, where it's to a lesser extent on the 250s.
On that note, working with Lake and the guys at Total Seal to make that max power, how have they been in terms of, how experimental do you get with these things? How is it different? I know ring seal is important no matter what, but you guys are in a totally different environment, as in you're in the air, or you're just the dynamics on the engine are totally different. Sounds almost kind of marine in that you guys are undulating these bikes and these engines. So to maintain ring seal, what are you doing? How closely are you working with Total Seal, and how have they been in terms of your creativity?
Well, their technology that they're able to offer us, has been an eye opener for myself. And typically we'll go with we have a Piston sponsor, let's say, and they provide a ring and it works really well. Well, now I have some options to plug in there, and now instead of relying on the engineers on the Piston side, now we're kind of starting to control some of the direction of what the piston and ring combination are able to provide. So it's, it's been a pretty good learning curve for me to kind of understand how critical all these measurements are, clearances, so forth. Total Seal has some new technologies that we've actually been able to try to implement over the traditional piston ring. And so, being able to quantify that and, dyno it and durability test it, all that stuff's actually in process, like on a daily basis for us now that's become available to us.
And that's been a huge learning curve for me too, Joe, is that me being still fairly new at Total Seal, being able to, call Dean, my office was 2 doors down from him at Gibbs, to be able to come over and say, okay, here's what we have. Let's think about what we have. Let's try testing these things, trying the different combinations is, for my learning curve, really gives me, like Dean was mentioning about the clearances and the surface finishes and how critical they are to the performance of the engine. What we've done this summer in some testing has really opened my eyes and helped move my learning curve way up. And I can't thank him enough for that, because that's part of this, hidden horsepower adventure is we're all trying to figure out how to make more power from our engines, for be it power management or just, like I said, drag racing, just straight out max power because I can hook it to the ground. You can read all this stuff in the book, and you can hear people lecture about things like back clearance and what effect that has on ring seal and reversion. But until you put it in the engine and actually try it, it's just theory. It's being able to literally put a ring or an exhaust or whatever it is on the engine, in the engine, and then put it in the dyno and then do your back-to-back comparisons. That's where theory becomes a reality. And that's what's awesome about being able to continue to work with guys like Mark Cronquist and Dustin and Dean and all the different people who are at Gibbs that I've known for so many years, to be able to utilize those tools that they have there, which are the best because Coach gave everybody the very best to work with, and then be able to take that and action it and learn from it. It's fun. It's just, I can't help it. It's so much fun to be able to do that. And thankful for Dean for giving us the opportunity to do research work. Because at this point, that's what we're doing. We're just doing research work, trying to find out what is the next best thing for the future. And I'd say one thing, and Dean can comment on it, we've already kind of learned, is that when you start playing around with some of these different ring technologies and designs, it's like you have to redesign the whole piston again. It's not just like I just put this ring on piston A, and all of a sudden it's the best thing I've ever seen. I'm sure that happened somewhere to somebody in time, but that's not been my experience so far.
No.
It's been like, just makes you have more questions, right?
Yeah, it's been a learning curve for sure. Like you say, it's I anticipated that we would hit on something pretty easily, but it's been here's session 1. Okay, we learned all this. Okay, we will come back for another dyno time, and then over and over and over, and it's it just keeps building and building, and there's nothing like learning by doing, and without having those options available to us, then we'd miss out on this learning opportunity to know what our engine wants and needs more intimately. It's kind of like I mentioned before, it was, you take a piston and a ring from a particular manufacturer, and that works really well together. Okay. Do we want to be just plugging in that part, or can we be, a tick better? And that's what we've been hunting down, is those little bits each time.
Very good. It's something that we've learned on the show, that these guys will come up with some ideas that the engine builders might not think is the best idea initially, and they're like, is this going to work? Is this ring too thin? And it turns out to work, and not only do that, but they end up finding some horsepower, and it's kind of interesting to hear it in your application. Talk a little bit about the 2-cycle to 4-cycle switchover that you guys had to go through. I'm sure that presented some challenges.
Sure. That was a unique opportunity for myself because when I was at Honda of Troy, that was early to late 90s, and everything was two-stroke. And so, everyone was pretty comfortable with what it took to make a two-stroke fast, reliable, durable. And we didn't know any different. And towards the end of the 90s, actually it was 2000, I believe, Yamaha released the first four-stroke motocross bike. And bikes, like, I don't know how far it was before I was interested in motorcycles, probably before I was born. They started out as four strokes because they were just, I guess, more like dual purpose type bikes that were made to run off-road, like a scrambles bike. Not really familiar with that too much other than, history books. But the current generation at that time was just, everything was two strokes. And that's just the way it was. So when Yamaha released that new 250 four-stroke for motocross, I was at Yamaha Troy, and so we were the team that got all the support, all the inside information, so that this bike was received well. It was competitive. It wasn't seen as, a trail bike that was converted to a motocross bike. It was a legit built for motocross type bike. And so typically the four-stroke was really heavy engine, and so they trimmed it down. They made the chassis was very similar to what the two-strokes were already running. There were some things that they had to accommodate for the engine height, so forth, for the packaging, but it was it was a legitimate motocross bike. So I was in a great position to learn firsthand, be one of the first in the industry to kind of start getting that experience. And that led to me being hired at Kawasaki, because their bike was starting to go through the prototype phase of development. And so when that bike was released, I would be there, so forth, to bring it into the racing arena. But the transition from two to four stroke, it was like most people wanted like nothing to do with it. Hands off. There's a bunch of parts in there. It's scary looking. Nobody was familiar with it. It was like, instead of looking at an engine, it's got different parts. So it was a bit of a learning curve for me, of course, because I had as much experience as everyone else, which was zero. But I did have people at Yamaha that took me under their wing and, showed me everything that they could to ensure that their bike was received well. And of course, was durable, reliable, so forth. And then the other manufacturers followed suit 2 or 3 years later. And then here it is, that's all that exists now is four strokes.
And there you have it. Very interesting. And that's got to be cool to be on the cutting edge of a move like that. Getting late in the show. Any final thoughts, any final questions you want to throw out there on the table for Dean? Is there any territory that we have failed to cover? Obviously, building power for this style of racing has got to be, I don't see these engines blow up very often. That's one thing that I could tell you. Maybe they do, but I don't notice. Anything you want to ask Dean before we go, Lake?
Well, yeah, going back to the two-cycle versus four-cycle, what do you use from your experience? What was the strengths of the two-cycle, and what did you, when you went to the four-cycle? Obviously, like you said, the infinite more parts, and all of a sudden now you have this wet clutch, and it was so incredibly different. When you think about a two-cycle, I'm just thinking about some of our kart motors we have now, and my dad's old vintage stuff, what those things air cooled, how different they are compared to a 4-cycle engine. Just for what your personal experiences and thoughts, okay, what are the strengths of the 2-cycle? Where were they short? And then what were the things about the 4-cycle that were like, oh, this is really a cool new tool that we couldn't do before with the 2-cycle?
Yeah, the 2-strokes were, I would say, as far as from an engine builder perspective, the 2-strokes were definitely more hands-on, where, like I mentioned earlier, like I had to hone some skills on the lathe. So we're cutting our own heads and combustion chambers, cylinders, decking cylinders, cutting the base, machining our own engine cases. Then you have the port work that you're doing by hand. That was one of the things that, or those are all the things I had to kind of learn as I progressed through the years as far as being an engine builder. All those things kind of fell on my plate, and so you just start working at it, and that's how those skills are tested. And of course, we want to have the best engine, so the drive to keep doing that and make it better was there. And it's, I don't know, I can't say enough about the 2-stroke days that it was really fun. Really enjoyed that time. And the 2-stroke, the strength of the 2-stroke engine was kind of like being able to change those yourself, hands-on. If there was something I wanted to change in the head, I just do it.
Right.
That kind of flexibility, I guess. And of course, the 2-stroke we could make competitive horsepower with today's 4-strokes when you're talking about peak numbers, but it's kind of a losing battle when you do compare a dyno curve from one to the other, where the 4-stroke now pretty much has it beat hands down. For when you take one application, if it's supercross, motocross, of course, if you go off-road riding, enduro type stuff, all this that I'm claiming, you could say that, okay, it's different because there's guys racing 2-strokes predominantly in some of those series. But for our application, we need a lot of torque exiting the corners so that we can have usable high levels of power, and it's tractable. So the 4-stroke just has this unbelievable torque curve that the 2-stroke does not have. And so that just lends itself to our type of racing in comparison to the best days of the 2-strokes. The 4-strokes, which is, it's a heavier motor, there's more parts, all that stuff. It's now competitive with those weights. So the 4-stroke, it's the strength is in the torque. And I guess the difference as far as an engine builder, being able to change some of that stuff, like I was kind of touting on with the 2-stroke, was, I can change the cam timing, but I can't really maybe come up with a cam same day. I have to go to our cam supplier and, or maybe I have a cam sitting on the shelf, but as far as really making something new, it takes time. You have to go to the cam supplier or so forth. The head work, I can do that stuff here. So I guess a lot of it is, a big part of the 4-stroke is the cam, and that's what I kind of maybe get tied up on is that it's not as easily to just come up with a totally new setting, because the cam is basically what the ports are to the 2-stroke.
Yeah, exactly.
So
the valve train of the 4-cycle, that it is. It's the same thing as the port timing, and like you said, you can go. If you wanted to change port timing and raise the exhaust port, you could do it yourself that same day.
Yeah,
grinding a new cam, forget about it.
Biggest influence on the two engines.
Interesting. I used to work at a watercraft dealership, and that was my experience with two-stroke stuff. And it was, black magic.
Yeah.
Very...
Black magic is the electronics now.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Oh, no. Exactly.
Well, another thing you got to go through, right? You went from 2 cycles to 4 cycles and went from carburetors to EFI. You've seen it all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the guys that get flown in and they get the big bucks.
That's what they say. There's a saying or something like that.
Well, I will say this. I got to give Dean credit because it wasn't that long ago we were having one of those test days, and I made a very bonehead mistake, but we didn't realize it was
This is the funny story
mistake.
about Lake that you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
And we're sitting there, we made a sweep on the dyno with the change we had just made, and wow, the engine just got pig rich. It's like, crazy rich. We're thinking, man, how could it have changed that much? And I was like, well,
the room starting
getting kind of foggy out there,
filling up with blue smoke.
Yeah. So to give Dean a little bit of credit though for his EFI skills, he's like, okay, looked at the air fuel ratio and he's like, all right, pull the laptop out, and work on different tables. He makes some table adjustments and loads the new program in and fire it back up and make a run. And man, just one shot at it, nailed the air fuel ratio, just curves right back. Well, engine lost even more power. And we're like, what in the world is going on? Man, all we did was change, rings. Well, actually we changed the piston, but that's the thing. We changed the piston and we changed one ring. So the problem is the piston, these motorcycle engines, they have 2 rings. So if you forget the oil control ring,
yeah, you have no oil control.
Really control the oil. and it might turn a 4-cycle into looking like a 2-cycle in the dyno room, and then all that extra hydrocarbon from the oil may tell the O2 sensor that the engine is rich. In fact, it's actually not rich on fuel. You just need to have a better engine guy in the room with the head engine builder that can remember to put the oil control ring on the piston. And we did that, and it fixed it, and then he had to put the air fuel ratio back, and everything was good. So there you go. There's your I'm a dummy story.
There it is. We got one.
Yeah, I share part of that responsibility because I'm sliding the cylinder onto the piston and didn't even notice it. It went on really easy, I guess.
Listen,
that low friction ring.
People learn from to be able to learn from other people's mistakes is a great thing, and so now everyone is going to remember this one.
Yeah.
Well, I told my son this morning I've done more of my learning from the mistakes I've made than from watching other people. So I keep, and I'm 48, and I still haven't figured out how to learn differently. But that's the reason why I keep on. We were at my dad's today on the dyno this morning doing some work. That's how I learn. If I don't go in there and try, I probably won't bump my head on the wall, and then I won't learn something. But that's how you learn is by keep trying.
That's right.
Try to avoid making the same mistake twice. Dean, this has been a great episode, and I really appreciate what you have laid out on the table. But at the end of every episode of Hidden Horsepower, I like to assume that we have new listeners and a new generation of people that want to be involved, seeking out the website, seeking out the podcast, specifically to try to gain some knowledge, not just great entertainment, but gain some knowledge. And so I ask all of our engine builders and guests if they have any advice they would like to throw out to the next generation, a way to get from where they are to where they want to be, something in the engine shop. Who knows what direction you might take on this, but if you have any advice for the folks out there, let's hear it.
Sure. I would say that if you first need to gain the mechanical skills, so a mechanic school of your choice, and then if it's You know, if you're in love with Supercross, motocross, or road racing or car racing, whatever it might be, then get involved somehow, because there's nothing like learning if you're given the chance to have hands-on experience.
Excellent stuff, and I totally agree, and that is right in line with a lot of the things others have said. There's no substitute to being in there and getting it done that way. Dean, thank you very much. You've been great, very illuminating, the whole world of Joe Gibbs Racing, motocross, the racing team, all of that. You know, I didn't ask you, though, an uncomfortable question. Maybe I should. So who is the GOAT? Like, really, though? Like, you've been there. You've been in the middle of it. When people have the big argument and the debate about McGrath and Carmichael and Bubba and all of these guys, do you want to weigh in there? Do you want to go there?
The greatest of all time, Supercross?
Yeah.
McGrath.
All right. He said it. He's on the record.
And, the GOAT of motocross, Ricky. So I guess there's got to be two crowns. I like it, and I like the fact that you answered the question. You did not try to slither out of it, which I greatly appreciate. Dean, thank you very much. Lake, final thought.
Just thanks for Dean being on, and just thanks for everybody for listening. If you've made it this far in this episode, we appreciate you hanging on to the very bitter end.
There you go.
But it's a lot of fun. Again, Dean, thanks for coming on. Joe, thanks for making this happen. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
There he goes, Dean Baker, head engine builder, Joe Gibbs Racing Motocross Lake. That was great. You say the bitter end, but I think people, you know, you're in the middle of it. You're the one in the dyno room making mistakes and causing problems, but I think that's entertaining and a way for people to learn on these podcasts.
Well, I hope so, because, again, Dean's a great guy to have on the show for me, because, I mean, like I said, we were two offices down from each other in the building, so we were back and forth all the time on, you know, they had two different dynos there. They had the big engine dyno over at the Cup Shop, which is the AC unit dyno with the controlled air and all the fancy stuff, and then we had the little chassis dyno down at the Nationwide shop where the motocross shop was. And so we were back and forth testing all kinds of different engines on those things for oil development or, you know, clutch development or engine development. So he's a guy I've known, worked with really closely for a long time. So he's seen me at my best and my worst. So he was pretty kind to me today, actually.
That's great. Yeah, the embarrassing story was good. But I know that there's more. Lake, for the audience out there who are looking for that hidden horsepower, building an engine, a bracket engine, or they are an engine builder and they're looking to find some great customer service, where should they go? And I'm hitting you guys heavily on this brand new website. I'm looking at it now. It's such a huge step forward for people who are looking to find, whether it be rings or tools or otherwise, even Total Seal swag. You guys have got it. Where should people go if they want to find out more information?
So TotalSeal.com, that's the new website you're talking about. And we have all the different families of rings. You know, a lot of people know us for gapless rings, but we do way more than just gapless rings. We do way more than just racing. So hidden horsepower isn't just a racing thing. I mean, we do rings for airplanes. We do them for antique tractors and 1907 Benz engines, you know, restoration things and air compressors. So that's the great thing about guys like having Keith Jones and Bobby and Kevin on the phones back at the office in Phoenix. These guys have over 100 years of experience combined, owning machine shops, building engines, doing work for all those, from, you know, Formula One to an antique tractor. They've done it all. They've got some experience. So whatever you're working on, you know, you can begin your process at TotalSeal.com. You can review the different kind of packages we have. We've got an online catalog. You can look up parts for, if you're just looking for, you know, a 16th, 3/16 ring package for your 30 over small block Chevy or small block Ford, then the part numbers are right there. You can look them up and you can go order them. Or if you got something more special and you really want a customized ring package, then you can give us a call, 623-587-7400, and one of those guys will be happy to help you out.
Excellent. Great job, Lake. I look forward to the next one. We didn't blow anything up this time, but we learned a lot, and I think we've got a whole new audience. Those motocross, supercross guys, they are as part of motorsport as anything else. In fact, in many ways, their competition is as intense as anything, maybe more so. Really appreciate it that he also went there on my who is the GOAT question. Lake, great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it, sir.
He's Lake Speed Jr. I'm Joe Costello. You can follow me at WFO Joe on Instagram and on Twitter. We're bringing you the best. We're finding the hidden horsepower. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, we would love if you would write a review, maybe give us a 5 stars if you think we're worth it. Spotify, SoundCloud, you can find the show anywhere. And tell your friends. Share it on social media. And like Lake said early in the show, new Facebook page for Hidden Horsepower. We want to hear from you. We're going to keep finding the best of the best in the engine building world and interviewing and pulling out those great stories right here on Hidden Horsepower.